I think that this particular collection of women invites us to pray. And I would invite you to pray with me, with the hope that God will deliver into our thoughts ideas about how we can knit these stories together. Glorious God, we are lost. We need help. We are grateful that you have come before us, that you stand with us, that you walk with us from behind, to steer our thoughts, to guide our hearts, and to show us where our hands could be at best work. Give us hope. Amen. All right. I'm going to start off by skipping the question of the day, whatever. Only because in response to the number of names we're going to cover, I'm going to divide you into 6 groups. All right. This is group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. Group 5 is over here. And we'll probably tackle the 6th group together. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bill, you're on 5. Over here. Yeah. Okay. And if need be, we'll do 6.
Oops. Where's the start?
6 starts with you.
Me. All right.
All right. Group 1, your assignment is Rahab and Ashgar, or Aksa. Group 2, your assignment is Deborah and Jael. Group 3, I am loving y'all so much. Your group is Jephthah's daughter, Samson's mother, and Delilah. Whee! Okay. Group 4, I think I'm on 4, right? You guys get the jewel in the whole oyster. Ruth and Naomi. Yeah. Okay, if you would like to change to be a part of the
We're not changing.
and group 5, which includes this group, will be Hannah. I'll give you a hint. You can contrast Hannah to Samson's mother if you realize it. 6, you're with 5. I'm just gonna say that it works better. So as an overview, now that you have your group assignments, here's your overview. These 2 books work together to talk about the book of Joshua and the book of Judges, work together to show us the distance between God and the people who are working toward keeping the covenant with God. There is a Grand Canyon of distance between God and God's purposes and people with whom he's made a covenant. These 2 books show us how hard they struggle, how well they fail, and how difficult it is to be a participant in that time zone. Right? This is a warring time. This is a bloody, violent time. I apologize. I skipped one of our topics, the Levite concubine, because the story was just too gruesome. And it just didn't make me feel good at all. So I'm going to say, while you're reading about the women that you've been asked to read about, read the scripture that's associated to their name. And then I want you to answer, what is the lesson for us in the story of Rahab? What is the lesson for us in the story of Aksa? What is the lesson for us in the story of Deborah, who is one of the shining jewels of our conversation this week? Who is Jael, and what is the lesson about her for us? And I'll give you a hint. Resolve.
Yeah.
And so forth. So you kind of get the pattern. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. And we'll see how we're doing at 15 minutes. So it is 10:15, and at 10:30, I'm going to draw us back together. So
really glad you're part of all.
Jeffrey's daughter, Angie's mother, and the line. Yeah, okay. Great. And well, yeah, I always, as a judge, I found, and she, interestingly, she talks about. He makes a deal with God. And I'll tell you what I'll do. I promise to sacrifice the first person that comes out to meet me after you help us win against the fraud. And so she raised an interesting question. The first person to come out to meet me. And he has vowed to God, sacrifice the first person. And she makes an interesting question. First of all, when we find ourselves in extreme situations, we're quick to make a deal that we think can get us out. And she raised the question, when you make that kind of a deal, you be responsible for carrying out that if indeed something so extraordinary takes place in your daughter's act. Seem to be off the hook for that. I mean, it's like, does God want something like that? Did God ask for that?
I think if you really need, I don't know, but if you don't be able to make. You said that. Because you don't carry. The Lord delivers.
Well, and you get into the whole thing about what Rob says about that. And it's interesting, he said that, look at the thing, yes, yes, no, no. And don't make that.
And not the other kid.
Don't make that. Like I said, you can trust God and go ahead, but don't go be making that. Don't go be super. Don't take my name in vain. Don't fear. Vow. Don't do it. It's hard to thank the others. Because if you you go, because God doesn't want this kind of situation. And you have to say, yeah, do. Come on. Trust God. You don't have to want to make a deal. If you think about it, how many times have you done simple things try to make a deal that gets friendly, you know? And you go, wait a minute. In retrospect, if I'm a friend of you guys, and we are in, yeah, together, and we need to make balance. No, we trust each other. There's a difference there. So what's the lesson in these demonstrating things? I think that's very beautiful. Next, we have. Sandy's mother, but no one's wife. Oh. There's a recurring theme throughout the book of Genesis. The issue is to be.
Don't trust the women to pay
And it happens. It's just like. Happens over. And when you look at where it is. Like each confederation. So if you look at how nations. It's not also. It'll be 2 or 3. That have done but it's a recurring phrase. And one question I have is, are they not learn from each other? Come on, guys. I mean. It's a lesson. So. Here we go with. What the story is all about. What would you say? It's the main. Well, to be honest with you, I have the Manoa thing, well, it's my thing. It's something that. I'm not kidding, but.
That's right. Yeah, and then the question was. What do we know about him? Jay. Yes, it's all bad stuff. It seems so, but we just didn't always get the system into your hands. That's and David Hurry kids, chariots, all to these your hands, so. It gets off the chariot. Everybody around. You don't look at first 2 years get beat down here. They have I guess the lesson for me.
That.
I think.
So it's normally we already do. In Samson school. So it's like, I don't want to have it.
She was a judge. And so she was wise and strong. It's amazing.
Samson.
It's a very aggressive.
What's the lesson?
She has too much. I don't think she's evil. People.
Story of time. I think. I'm gonna go up and look here. He has got a lot. And you know, there are some common things that really. see her in the body, temptation of evil. She played. I've been pleasure. He tries to get. Tell her his secret. I said, hey, he was having anything in my hair.
You have about 5 more minutes.
I look at that and say,
And they saw.
Don't go camping with your.
That's right.
Or definitely go camping with JL. I don't know which one. It's like, I'm on her side. Okay, if you're already done, make notes about what you want to say the lesson is. Because I want you to report back.
That's right. That one man. Yeah, you got a sledgehammer.
Whether you agree with it. And you see her. When they honestly bring up. She looks like that. Very convincing. You might say, well, dude, he didn't have experience.
I should have been.
No. And yet, you know, she's playing a role. It's like. You have Judas in the text. I find it to be a troubling character. If he is betraying Jesus, should he be damned? I don't have an answer to that, but I struggle with, hey, he's carrying out the influence. See if it's there. And so you go, all right, how do we? I'm glad you did.
From Dusty now.
Okay, I'm gonna start to pull us back together.
I don't know about now.
So our first group was reading about Rahab and Jael. And we're gonna take a poll at the end of our class of which of these women is the one that you think is most interesting. That doesn't mean that she's most godlike or most I guess, admirable, but most interesting, okay? So our group that had Rahab and Rahab and Aksa. Tell us about these ladies and what's the lesson for us today?
You took notes, but, so, yeah, the main lesson we got from the two of them, I think, was, women who stood up for themselves. Rahab, but they make this point that she's a prostitute, and that the both of them stood up for their families. They were the ones who were looking out for their families. You know, she's a prostitute, and Axel is just given away as though she were property. But in the long run, they're the ones who demanded that their families be protected. What else did we say? We said, go ahead.
With it about Rahab, there's a lesson of that God is faithful to those who carry out God's purposes. That both women are women of action, and that was kind of what Kim was getting at, that they are the ones who care for their family. And there's a strength to standing up for what's right, in this case, in particular about caring for or providing for their family. And what for the case of Aksa, that would have been normally her husband's responsibility or role, but she's the one, at least in the text reports, that she's the one who actually is the one who secures the field and the land for her family. So kind of in roles that we didn't typically see in this time, I guess.
And I also like that she argued for the well.
Yeah.
Because that's what she goes back for and says, I want the water source too. And I thought, she's a smart person because she knows she can't raise any kind of livestock without that water access. I thought that was really valuable.
And as far as to which, you know, I know the text talks about the fact that Rahab is a prostitute and why do they make a point of that? But I don't think they really make a point of it. They just say, you know, they went into the house of a prostitute, which makes some sense if you were two men trying to be undercover, that you would go somewhere where men went. But they don't, you know, they don't really make a point of speaking of her as though she is some lower being because she was a prostitute. They just, you know,
As a businesswoman.
yeah.
So I think for me, that's the difference between what's captured in the text and what we have historically put upon Rahab, is that we don't talk about her just Rahab or Rahab the faithful or Rahab the provider for her family, Rahab the prostitute. So her profession becomes her identity. And so,
And that's a survivalist perspective,
Right.
right? She's oftentimes women that were not married and didn't have a family that would claim her were forced into position to make money, to make a living, to raise her children. And those are decisions that I don't know how we would respond today if those were the only circumstances we had to work with. So, yes, sir.
A quick story I heard in the 1950s growing up in the church north of Orlando. The pastor's wife, parents, had been missionaries in Africa. And he was a great guy. He would come and tell his story. I will never forget even as a small child understand stories. He said when Christian missionaries went into parts of Africa, they demanded if a man became a Christian that he choose one wife and expel the other. The village expelled. Where did they go? To the seacoast to become prostitutes or slavers. That was the only thing in that culture they could do. And I remember his lament. Could we not have found another way to help people with the gospel?
I always like that answer. Can we not find a better way? Our group number 2, we have Deborah and Jael. What a pair. Would anybody like to?
The first thing we said was, never trust a woman with a tent tag. But, secondly, I think the strength of women was, evident all the way through both of the stories. And Deborah as a prophet, we said we could just visualize her sitting under the palm trees, passing judgments that people brought to her for advice. And secondly, that they both wanted what was best for their people and their families. And we also said that we would like to be on the good side of JL and rather than her enemy.
I found it interesting that JL is married to Heber, and Heber is the brother-in-law of Moses. So interesting connection there, and you wonder what Jael learned about the God of the Israelites from Moses, because there must have been at least a conversation. And that may have led us to that arrival of why she took Sisera, maybe the right way to say that. Why she took the S name out. All right.
Something at this point.
Sure.
This is one of my favorite parts of art and the Renaissance. Women artists were not allowed to. They're fantastic women artists in the Renaissance, and the only thing that they could paint were pictures from the Bible, and so many of them. There's several that I just adore, but so many of them painted these. It was not Deborah. It was Judith. That she's not in our Bible, but she's chopped off. What says that? She chopped off his head, and there's these wonderful, gory, bloody, fantastic paintings that are the size of this room. These women painted because they could take that anger and show how they were being treated. Many of these women actually worked for their husband, who were not very good painters, but became famous because of their art. But if you look up Renaissance women paintings, and you will see the most incredible pictures of all the angels in the Old Testament. So it's just fantastic. And this woman has some great bad going in it. So that's very bad. Anyway, I had to look.
All right, group 3, you were asked to help us make sense of Jephthah's daughter, Samson's mother, and Delilah. What do you got for us today?
Well, we discussed first of all Jephthah's daughter, not so much her, but for his making a vow that God didn't ask for, and trying to make a bargain, and then got trapped in the tradition that when you make a vow, you got to fulfill it. And I know she emphasizes in her talking about it that the daughter obeys. And would she not have been legitimately in her own right to say, listen, dude, you made the vow, not me. And basically say, I refuse to go along with that, but she doesn't. So I guess you would say, for better or worse, she has a little bit of chance to say goodbye to friends and all this kind of stuff. And then boom, she obeys the father doing the vow. And it's pretty gruesome to think about that.
George R.R. Martin gives us a similar story in his Game of Thrones books. And it's where the leader of the clan decides to sacrifice his own daughter, thinking it's going to put him in a better position. And so I really questioned the logic of that. And I think the Bible Project gave me enough information about the judge, because the father was a judge, that he was making the similar kind of conversation and vow that he would have made to a Canaanite god. And that's interesting that he transferred Canaanite god behaviors and expectations onto the God of Israel, and how incongruent those two things are. And so I thought that was really an interesting point Tell me more about Samson's mother.
We didn't spend a heck of a lot of time on Samson's mother. But I guess in that passage we looked at toward the end, 22 to 25, the whole idea about, hey, we're doomed. God's going to do us in. And Samson's mother said, no, no, no. God wanted to kill us, we would be gone now. But he didn't. And then right after that, the passage finishes with, okay, she has Samson, and through Samson, God's spirit works.
Mhm.
So the thing is, I guess, trust God to carry out God's purposes, and we just need to be a part of that, I guess.
Now, I wonder about the molding as parenting. I'm a parent and I watch what happens to my kids by the decisions that I make. I'm thinking about the decisions that she and her husband made and how that might have affected Samson's behavior. Samson was known to see a Philistine woman and say, go get her for my wife. And they were like, but she's not of our clan. He goes, I don't care, go get her. And so here's this rather arrogant and impulsive young man that's been raised by this woman and her husband, who she had no children, didn't look like the prospects were good, and suddenly gets the opportunity. I wonder about, did we err on the side of too permissive in the process of raising him to put him in a position where he was going to be a flawed instrument of the purposes of God? Because he becomes a flawed instrument. And we learn that through the story of Delilah. Who's your third young woman to speak about?
You guys want to say something about Delilah?
Your turn.
I made the statement, I think Delilah has gotten bad press all along. She was a very persistent and persuasive person with a golden mind and achieved it. And he's the one that's weak. In terms of he may have hair, which some of us older gentlemen do not. It's like, okay, if he had stayed true to himself, he could have resisted her persuasive persistence. And then she was persistent and she was persuasive and she found out the secret.
And I disagreed with him because she did this for money.
And for people.
Yeah.
I will
I
say
didn't
that,
much like the life.
I have, when I meet people like Delilah, I marvel at their ability to manipulate others. And I consider that a tool, either used for ill or for God's purposes, to be destructive or helpful. And I'm hoping that I can lean toward helpful when when I give them the opportunity to be manipulative. All right, group number 4. That's Naomi and Ruth. I would love to hear about Naomi and Ruth.
Y'all all know the story, right? But it's one of the important things is that Boaz was the daughter of Rahab, was the son of Rahab.
Yes.
So when we start off, we need to look at what God had planned on us. And the name, there's a wonderful love story here, the gorgeous love story, and it is all positive. If you want to find a place in the Bible that there is a positive amount of love and care and concern for one another and doing the right thing, this is probably one of the best books that you can read for a woman. Me, my mother-in-law never got along, so I would have taken care of her. But anyway, that's basically what this story is about. And I think that is a moving towards what God expects us to be and how He expects us to act. Instead of, and that's one of my favorite ones is really she gets chopped up into 7 pieces or 12 pieces and sent off. But this one is one of absolute love and caring. And the guys have pointed out that she was not Jewish.
True.
And that if you go along, Rahab there's several adds into the line of Christ, the house of David, that are not the classic Jewish woman. And that's very important for us to understand that those people come in and make it a more powerful law. So. Did I do it right, guys?
Another thing was.
Oh, go ahead.
There were two. And also. And they, when their husbands both died, so that's a big problem. And Naomi felt that she was kind of old, and would drag them down. So she recommended that they go back to their people, please go back to themselves. Well, Ruth wanted to take care of her mother, that was nice. And Oprah, I guess, had a TV show, so she went back. He's gone to the story. Then you try and diagram a lot of these things. You try and diagram the family. When you have Rahab as the mother, and the box for the father's got a question mark in it. But Boaz comes from that. And Boaz is going to play a part later on. Now, we could also taken care of because one of the problems when you started gleaning the fields, there's a lot of farm hands out there that, let's just say they were open. So it was dangerous for a woman to glean the field. Well, she could get the food, but maybe she didn't want the other stuff. So Boaz made sure that she didn't get. So he's a protector. So these things are kind of working out for him. And then when Boaz leaves, eventually I don't understand all the illustrations that Richard's sort of forward. He caught on. So anyway, they got married. They had a child named Ben. So that's where the David thing, his grandfather was David. So then you have a Moabite woman, and Boaz, I don't know what he was. And then you get one that's in the line of Jesus. So it's going on through the line. So people that backed up through the evidence got to be Jews, not that didn't work that way. And so God's purpose isn't always what people think it is. You have this little thing way back in the Old Testament produced this particular line that really didn't follow 1, 2, 3, all the rules. And that's what's interesting about this story too, is it's quite different. You might not expect that to be the case.
It's interesting that Naomi and her husband are climate refugees. They leave the land that they're given. They go into a land that has not been hit by famine and by starvation. And so they move into Moabite lands, and their sons take Moabite wives. And then the Moabite wives lose their husbands. And as was the custom, you return to your family. And we don't know what the backstory is there. Maybe Ruth didn't have a family to return to. Maybe Ruth's family was not favorable to her returning because that's another mouth to feed, another expense associated to care and feeding. And that would leave Naomi on her own. And that's very vulnerable, right? A widow on the road by herself. So Ruth leaves Moabite land, leaves familiar, goes with Naomi back to Naomi's land and Naomi's family. So there's this interesting refugee immigration problem that's moving them back and forth across the boundaries of what it means to be God's people and living in the promised land. And I think that for me is helpful because it means there's more at work here than just this really lovely story. Because I think that's part of what we read it and we go, okay, that's fine, we're moving on. But there's a whole lot of layering going on there. And I'm certain there was a certain prejudice applied to Ruth and especially Naomi because they had left and they've come back. So they are the outsiders and they are practicing in a way that is unfaithful to the instruction to marry within your clan. So there's this interesting juxtaposition about prejudice and about the way people treat each other when they're perceived to be outsiders versus insiders.
As you begin their story, you see somebody walking the walk. See an example of empathy and root.
Exactly.
When you see it demonstrated, it's a lot better than you yakking about.
And it's interesting that Naomi says that her name means bitter because of where she's been. And toward the story's finish, it looks very different when she's holding Obed. And I think that's a sweetness. All right.
You get one group, with the 5 of it to go.
We got one more group to go. That would be this group, and you had Hannah. Tell us about Hannah.
I was the reader.
So then, tell us about it.
Well,
Do you want me to talk?
yes,
Be careful what you wish for. Because, I mean, one of the things that we talked about briefly was that in classical Greek mythology, you ask for different gifts, but there's always a hook. And you gotta be careful exactly how you phrase that. It's like Aladdin's lamp, you get 3 wishes. But be careful how you phrase those wishes. And the one wife had prayed for a son. And she got a son, but then she had to give the son up, which was a great sacrifice. It was something she always had wanted, and we didn't care too much for the other wife. It was always antagonizing. The other wife, I can't tell you names, right? I gloss over them when I get to
The
them.
P name and the H name, and yeah.
I mean, I can't keep all of them straight, but God bless you guys over here trying to keep straight all those names. So, I mean, I guess that was the bottom line. Prayer works. Work hard at it and just keep on going. You'll get what you wish for, but be careful that you covered all the bases.
Who was Hannah's son?
Samuel.
So Samuel plays what kind of role?
That's from the church. What do you call it? Anoints the kings.
Yeah, so he also,
Telling the people what the king will do.
Absolutely.
If you want to read the very contemporary scripture, read First Samuel 18.
I want to say something about being careful. First of all, I disagree with be careful what you pray for. I think you could pray for anything and everything.
I
and
didn't
God-
say you can't. I
Okay.
just said be aware that there might be a consequence. Agreed.
I just, I was taught that as a little kid. It took me years to come to the point that say, I can pray. God listens to whatever I have to say. But he might not give you one. Well, but the other thing is that is a common, I think that we as people today look at that as being very sad to give up your son when he's 7 years old. But back then, that was pretty common. I mean, even up until the 18th century, I would say many families, they would give their sons would go into, what do you call that? Apprenticeships or schooling or whatever at a young age. And you might not see them, but on holidays or on, religious days. So saying that was a sad thing was not. She was willing to do whatever she could to have a son, and her promise to God was a glorious thing. I believe.
well, I also want to interject here that at this point in time, was it appropriate for women to pray to God? Was it appropriate to not go to temple and just ask the person at that temple to pray for you to go to God? So we have a woman who's directly addressing God, praying directly to God, opening her heart in all of that anguish to God.
And I thought she was drunk.
So I want to say, I think I like one of the themes I'm hearing about these women, and we heard it in the story of Rahab and in the story of Jael, Aksa. She asks for what she wants. She speaks directly to the person who can help her. I think that it's interesting over here in this group, the woman with the tent peg, Jael, we don't know what the backstory is there. Sisera ruled that area with a very rough, rebellious, and bloody hand for 20 years. So this young woman, if she's young, has 20 years experience knowing who this person is and what he can do. There might be a really good backstory there. I mean, I'm thinking, I love how Wicked changes the way we look at the Wizard of Oz. I think that there might be a story there that we could uncover, that we could say, well, then I admired the tenacity because she played the long game. Delilah uses her resources to accomplish what she's been asked to do. Good or bad, she's resourceful. I think we could think of Naomi and Ruth as being an example of what it means to be committed and loyal. Hannah, I think, is the same way. She boldly speaks directly to God. She boldly asks for what she wants. And interestingly enough, there's a part of all of these women in the lineage of Jesus.
Time.
Yes.
And now we're done.
Hannah's prayer.
Thank you. Great job. And you have, and I'm going to send you all 18 pages. Stuff. But now you have the whole story. You can go back and read the sections that your group didn't do.